Welcome to the Chill Polyamory Patreon live chat, where the first Sunday of every month at 8 p.m. Berlin local time, I invite patrons €3 and up to come hang out. Talk to me about whatever you want. Polyamory, relationship anarchy, life in general. I'm here. Let's chat about it. And I'll offer feedback, of course, based on my experience of being 13 years now polyamorous. There will be a bonus live chat for patrons this month in a couple of weeks on January 19th. I like to offer bonus ones, sprinkle them in when I can. If you are watching this on YouTube afterwards and you want to join us next time, ask a question specific to your situation at a fraction of the price of a one-on-one chat together, you can go to patreon.com/chillpolyamory. And of course, if you do want a one-on-one video chat, I offer that at chillpolyamory.com. So I'm really happy to see you all here. Let's get started. Okay, first question that was emailed to me. My new partner is married with a 3-year-old kid. On our dates, their spouse keeps texting and interrupting about problems with their kid almost every time. I understand if their child is very sick or having an emergency, but it's starting to be a pattern, and I'm wondering if it's deliberately to disrupt our quality time. Do you have any suggestions on how to bring this up? So this is actually really interesting. Recently on Remodeled Love's podcast, I just posted it for patrons last week. So something's in the air. It was about like the weaponization of children in polyamory. And I think this can happen anywhere, but it can especially happen as like consciously or unconsciously. Sometimes people don't mean to, but like if they are wanting their partner to stay, but they don't have like a reason that feels justifiable, then they'll say, well, the kid really wants you to stay. You know, I'm not saying that that's this person's situation. I'm just saying like that can be like guilt and manipulation can sometimes be levied through childcare, unfortunately. And so I think it's fair to call that out, but not being a parent myself, first and foremost, I'm going to offer you the Remodeled Love podcast episode with Shanae Jackson. I think that's her last name. Shanae Speaks is her Instagram name. So those are 2 parents who are talking about that topic. 3 parents, actually. So how to bring it up? Well, do you have a relationship with the spouse is my first question, you know? So like, if yes, could there be a direct discussion? Because you know, obviously the Hinge partner is in a position to be able to set firmer boundaries or be able to talk to their partner and make more of a judgment call in context, you know, and as an authority figure in like child rearing, would be able to set more of a bound and say like, this feels appropriate, this doesn't feel appropriate. So ultimately, like, having a passive hinge is not going to be doable in this situation. We're really going to need the hinge to make sure that they're active in setting their own limits. But if you are friendly with this metamor and you're wondering something, is it an option to talk to them directly? I'd like to avoid playing telephone whenever possible, you know, and those aren't mutually exclusive. You know, your shared partner could talk to them as well. You know, and to that end, is your partner also picking up on the pattern? Do they also share that suspicion? Or if they don't see it, like, is that then a question? And how does your partner respond, you know, when it impacts dates? So I think that there can be curiosity. I think that that's usually where I try to lead with. I try to assume good intent, like we can feel off about a pattern, but still not like jump to a conclusion yet without further information. Because sometimes like, I don't know, if we don't have the whole picture, it can look a way that is not fully accurate. So I try to, you know, inquire further if I'm feeling off about something, but also not assume the worst yet. I want to ask questions. So, you know, like for example, if I was out with someone regularly and their kid seemed sick all the time, I would ask like, is everything okay with your child? You know, are they chronically ill? Like it seems to be happening a lot. And I'm worried that, you know, and if you're willing to share, I would love to know a little bit more about what you deal with, you know, and what they're going through. You know, like, so is it an urgent thing every day? Is it something that they get interrupted with a crisis with their child, even when they're not with you, for example, you know? So like that goes back to, you don't see them 24/7. It doesn't sound like. So asking for more information, asking for more context. And once you have a sense of the bigger picture, then you can probably get a clearer sense of what might be happening. What I have done before, going out with parents who I've felt a version of this, not so overt, but I've felt a version of this. I have said like, you know, absolutely, your child always comes first. I completely understand that. And I encourage prioritizing that. And then I might also say, I guess I'm just noticing like how often it happens when the two of us are spending quality time together, or like a request for the shared partner to say like, I'm wondering if you would be willing to only engage with it if it is actually an emergency, or, like, are there gradients to this, because I want to be a team player. And obviously I don't want this to be misunderstood as not caring about your child's problem. I'm just wondering, like, is it always an all or nothing? So you get to have needs in this as their partner, and it doesn't have to be like you versus the meta, you versus the child's problem. However, accurately that's represented by the meta. It doesn't have to be you versus that. It could be like, what are the solutions that could then make me feel like our quality time is being respected too? Does it get rescheduled in a way that is handled with care? Does it get paused but then resumed in a thoughtful way that, like, you're very present when you come back from being on the phone with them? You know what I mean? So it's like, can it be a discussion that is approached like with collaboration? I'd love to figure out a solution because I noticed I'm feeling this, and what do you think? So that's my approach. That's my style usually, to try to come in like, we're all in this together. We're all like, even if I don't know the meta, like, I want everybody involved to be okay. And if I'm feeling slighted, I don't want that to go unsaid. I don't want to put myself in the back seat as a default, because that usually then builds a resentment, and I'll either distance myself or it'll come out sideways, or I'll snap at them later. So I'm not a fan of having things go unsaid. If it's on my mind, I'll usually try and find a way to say it, which it sounds like you're trying to find a way to say it. So I support that. I hope that helps. Happy New Year, by the way. I don't know if I said that. Maybe I did at the top, sort of absentmindedly. 2025, here we are. Okay, next question. How do you handle it when one person is frustrated that you're moving too slow, but you're frustrated that they're rushing you? Is it ever possible to find a middle ground? So, well, that's a big question. And it's one that I actually hear in polyamory a lot, is there are different rhythms that a duo will have or a trio will have. There are different priorities of like, well, I'd love to go out and start having more sex immediately. Like, I'm excited about that. And then the other person gets very anxious when they have sex, And so it's like, these are almost an inverse proportion in terms of like desire for pacing. That's pretty common. When it comes to like, but there's not a whole lot of context added to this. So I'll just say context matters, right? Like, so someone's frustrated, you're moving slow, you're frustrated that they're rushing you. What is it about? So for example, if it is sex with each other, I don't think that there is like moving too slow with sex, in my opinion, when it comes to, your own, the sex that you're participating in or lack thereof. Like, your pace is your pace. And sometimes people want to do something with you, or maybe they'll like start in a kink relationship with you, and they have an idea of like their, type of kink that would be satisfying to them, and that's not something that you feel comfortable with and might not ever feel comfortable with, and then there's like pressuring happening that unfortunately can take place. So this could happen in a lot of contexts, but when it's something that you're participating in, I think your pace is your pace. And I don't think that there is an ideal destination necessarily. And if someone is disappointed by that, then it could be a talk about like, do we want the same things? Or like maybe what we're trying to do together isn't gonna be like satisfying for both of us. So let's do something different together. Maybe you want different things. However, that is entirely about like what you're participating in, your sex, your own relationships. Often I get this question in polyamory when someone is thinking that another person is moving really quickly with like their partner and is saying like, you need to slow down because I'm having panic attacks, because I'm anxious, like there's so much change over here that I would like there to be like less change or less frequency. And I'm nobody's mom, in terms of like telling you the right way to do polyamory. I do think that only can work if it's negotiated with everybody affected, right? And if nobody feels like guilted or pressured or coerced into changing their own pace of their relationship. Because if your partner would resent you for going on fewer dates, then has it really solved the problem, or has it just traded it for a new problem that now there's a resentment? Maybe you have less anxiety, but now there's a resentment, for example. Or if their other partner would feel like heartbroken that like someone that they're not dating is controlling the pace of their relationship, or their request has now superseded, their desire in their own relationship. That maybe control isn't the right word there so much as like the Hinge partner prioritizing your comfort over their, agency in their relationship. That's usually where I see it start to go wrong, is like you trade one problem for another. And it doesn't mean that like, so then suck it up and be uncomfortable and like deal with it. I don't have a harsh reaction in that respect. I think it's more about like naming the problem without jumping to the conclusion of what needs to be done about it yet. So I'm very uncomfortable. I get anxious a lot, for example. You just met this person and now you're off to the races with them, and I've noticed my anxiety is skyrocketing more. You're naming the problem. That is helpful in coming to the table of like, what are possible solutions here? What are possible ways to comfort me? Like, do I know more information, less information? Do we have more quality time? Do you reassure me more often? Do you see them less often because you could take it or leave it and you'd rather do that than have to do all the emotional labor of all these talks and all of these comfort? Like the Hinge partner has the ability to decide what feels worth it to them as well. So in that example, it's saying like, I have a lot of anxiety, you're naming the problem, and then not jumping to, therefore you have to slow down, naming the problem. I have a lot of anxiety. What are our options? Again, collaboration, coming together and saying like, there's a lot of different ways that we can tend to this need without me assuming that I know the one and only answer. What are all of the possible answers, and what new issues might each of those answers create on their own in terms of like, new problems or new conflicts, if anything. So sometimes when there is a lot of change that's outside of your control, you can also add points of stability. And what I mean by that is you can add like more routine in your own relationship. You can bulk up your own support network and see your friends more often, see a therapist more often if you have access to that. Do things that are cathartic or therapeutic for yourself. Sometimes people start exercising more. There are a lot of different ways that don't necessarily look like your partner changing things and fixing things for your comfort. It could also be like that there's other options that you have, tending to outside stressors or changes. And consistency can be one of those, when there's a lot of change and it feels like the earth is moving underneath your feet and you want to grab on to something. What can you grab on to? Like, do you have a regular date night every week now? Do you have regular check-ins with your partner so that you never feel like you're kept in the dark? Like they are being proactive and they're talking to you about every new thing that happens so that you're not surprised or, caught off guard. So this is specifically speaking to someone who is being told that they are going too slow, or is framing for themselves that they're going too slow. It's like, are you just wanting some ease, some comfort, some relief from stressors? And that can look a lot of ways. So can it just be a conversation, rather than pitting your needs against their needs? You're too fast, I'm too slow. That's sort of saying you and your partner are versus each other. Instead, saying like, here's a lot of anxiety. Is there something that can be done about that while you want to make these changes? And at the end of the day, if you do a lot of trial and error on that and you still don't feel respected, or your partner's breaking agreements, or you are feeling actively neglected, like they aren't following through, they said they'd take care of you and now they're not, they're dropping you in favor of this new relationship energy, and like they're essentially then pitting your meta against you and creating this sense of scarcity. If that happens, then you can decide like, does your relationship with the Hinge partner change? Are you in something you want to be in? But the first knee-jerk reaction can often be like, the thing that prompted me to feel stress, the thing needs to go away. And while that is an option, if that's fine with everybody and people could take it or leave it, that is an option. It is not the only option if that would, create new problems. So, but don't pit your needs against each other. That doesn't have to be that way. Teamwork. Next question in the chat. Are you aware of any books or resources specifically on what the Hinge role might have to take ownership for and the best ways they can perform those functions for the relationship? If you have any additional context, ownership for what? Like in terms of responsibility for your partner's feelings? There aren't any polyamory books like specifically about the Hinge role, but pretty much most of the polyamory books can address communication. It's communication. And I think one of the biggest pitfalls that Hinge partners that have two other partners, sometimes they know each other, sometimes they don't, sometimes they might even be dating each other, sometimes they're not. Whether your partners get along, whether they even know each other, you are able to negotiate both of those relationships in a way that neither of them as individuals can. So sometimes Hinge partners will fall into this like a bit of passivity or, wanting to avoid conflict or wanting to appease the most upset person in the room and rushing to put out this fire and rushing to put out that fire. And that can be a common issue of like not pausing and asking, what do I want? Which can very much, unfortunately, include saying no to people's requests. I don't want to do that. I understand you want that and you're very upset right now, but I don't want to do that. Or if I said yes to that, that would make me resent you later. So can we come up with something else, right? Like pausing and asking, what do I want? And if you don't know, keep asking, keep seeking out support, because it is exhausting and unsustainable for a Hinge partner to just be rushing to appease everybody involved. And there will be points in which multiple people want different things that are at odds with each other. And that's at a crossroads where you're going to have to be like, I'm making a judgment call about my own life and what I want to do and what I want to participate in and say yes or no to. And so, the Hinge partner owning their own choices. And that also very much includes owning a choice that involves other partners. So, for example, if one partner is very sick, and therefore you're going to cancel a date so that you can tend to caring for that partner, it's very common for a Hinge partner to go to that canceled date and say, I can't come tonight because my partner needs me. Now, that's not false, and it removes your choice from the matter. It can potentially, if you do that enough, or if you do that in an egregious enough of a way, it can then make your partner mad at the other partner. They are the reason that I don't have a date, Instead, going and saying like, hey, my partner is really sick. I think I would rather stay in and help care for them. I would be distracted on our date. So can we reschedule the date? That completely owns your choice, your agency, your ability to call the shots in your own relationship. And even if the person whose date is being canceled is upset by that or disappointed at the very least, it doesn't feel like someone outside the relationship is calling the shots. It feels like they're dating someone who assessed all of their options and made a judgment call for themselves. And then they're still talking to the person that they can negotiate directly with, right? They don't feel like the presence of someone else outside the room calling the shots. And so that I'd say is the biggest thing when it comes to Hinge responsibility, is get more and more comfortable with owning potentially unpopular, potentially painful decisions as your own decisions. And when it comes to like what you take responsibility for, or what you take ownership of in your partner's feelings, someone's feeling can be valid in the fact that it exists. And maybe they jump to a wrong conclusion. So I'm very upset. I am very distressed. Maybe that comes out as, you abandoned me. And maybe that rings false, but you also don't want to be a dick and be like, your feelings are totally invalid. Instead, saying like, is there a way for you to tell me your emotions without it being an accusation? Because I want to hear your emotions. I want to listen to you. I want to support you. And you're telling me that your feelings are my fault. And now it's like we're in a conflict. And, so what is it that you're feeling? And then sometimes I'll even give that person some emotion words to see if any of them ring true. Because maybe in their distress, they're not like, able to like grasp easily for that. Or they're a little bit out of practice with like naming emotions without them being blaming, which is common. We're not taught how to have distress, in productive ways all the time. But yeah, like we can say like, I hear you that you're upset. And whether you want to say it in that moment or say it later, if you don't care for the phrasing, if you don't agree with their framing, if you want to say that the way they said it hurt you, like there's nuance there in that, like, just because someone's upset or just because you might feel guilty or you might feel ashamed, it doesn't mean that one person has to be right and one person has to be wrong. It means that there's a situation that created these emotions in everybody, and let's look at it. What parts of it set off what? What parts of it are rooted in today? Oh, well, I didn't come back when I said I would. That is a thing. My bad. Also, your reaction is so big that, like, is part of it about something that's got nothing to do with this, right? Are you exhausted from the day? Are you reminded of trauma? Are you this? You know what I mean? It's like, it's fair to be upset that I didn't come back when I said I would, and I'll own that. And you're raising your voice and you seem really dysregulated. Like, can you tell me if something else going on? Or I would like to talk to you when you can not be yelling at me, because I'm just not gonna stay in the room if you're yelling at me. Like, you can self-advocate while also owning what you agree is your part in it. And so, I think just anything we can do to get out of binary thinking, of all or nothing thinking, of like somebody has to win and therefore somebody has to lose, somebody has to be fully in the wrong and therefore somebody's fully in the right. Like, that's just not really, if everybody's trying to come out on the other side as in a happy relationship with each other, like, there are very few situations where I think that that's the case, that it's that simple, So, okay, next question in the chat. Lately, I'm struggling with feeling like nobody in my life understands or wants non-hierarchical relationships. I'm single right now, but since the beginning of the poly journey, I've thought I've wanted non-hierarchy. Other poly friends I know used to talk about how they wanted it too, and then they ended up in hierarchical dynamics. I guess I'm discouraged and feel like I should follow suit. I'm not solo poly, but it's starting to feel like that's the only way to have true non-hierarchy. I don't know. I don't understand my value. I feel like other poly people don't understand my values, so I may as well simplify my life by choosing something monogamous or monogamish. Any advice? So I don't know your community. Every community has different tendencies. Some tend to be more conservative, or some tend to be like a bit less resourced. And maybe everyone around you is, really wanting hierarchy. When you say hierarchy, do you mean like that they are moving in with someone, or they're marrying someone, or they're like, there's one person in particular or one or two people in particular that they're embedding their lives with a little bit more? Is that what you mean? Because like that is, it can absolutely go hand in hand with somebody being more important as a unilateral thing, but also like sometimes people want to raise kids and then they meet someone who would be really great at doing that with them, and then they do that together. Or sometimes people really want to like start a small business and they can't do it alone, and then one of their other partners has that passion, and so then they start a small business together. It's like sometimes we do team up in ways that are more integrated because it feels organic and because that feels really nice. We absolutely have to continue having conversations about how to keep including other people who are less integrated, including them in decisions so that they still feel like they matter. But, sometimes people will equate, you're more integrated or you spend more time together, therefore you practice this unilateral hierarchy. That isn't always the case. So I'm not saying that that's what you're noticing. I'm just, I guess, wandering aloud if those things are being called synonymous, because it's not always. A lot of times, like, the optics of it can look similar to people who have a completely different worldview. And so I like to just inquire a little bit further. And maybe absolutely they, like, the people you're watching have just completely checked out and they're like, never mind, this is normal, this is easier, I'm just going to go with the current and, and do that because I have fewer social judgment or fewer social repercussions or whatever. That is very real, and that can happen too. I rarely use non-hierarchy anymore. I use anti-hierarchy because I think there is a dailiness to that practice. I think it is in every small decision that we make, big decisions too, of course, but every small decision that we make, Am I assuming that one person should automatically matter more? Am I on autopilot? Am I making a decision that totally affects one of my partners, but I'm not including them in that decision because they've only been a partner for a few months or something? And whoops, there's the hierarchical impulse again. Okay, let me backtrack. So we all will fall back into it. I don't see it as you flip a switch and now you care about hierarchy or you don't. It's like, even in this effort of anti-hierarchy, sometimes we're forced to participate in systems that, we're choosing the lesser of the evils because we don't have a lot of options. And I don't blame individuals for systemic, situations. But also sometimes we can practice it really regularly and then slip and then, have a spot that we didn't check or didn't realize. And that doesn't mean automatically that person is always hierarchical. It means they fucked up and that needs to be a conversation. So yeah, I think in terms of like having community around wanting anti-hierarchy, I look at like, well, what else are they doing in their life? Is like, are they really wanting their friendships to feel valued? Are they default setting, in terms of like, well, I'm going on a vacation. Of course it will be with my spouse. I'm going on a vacation and I'm just going to announce to my other partners that it's happening, rather than ask like, hey, I'm thinking of going this week. Does that, mess with your schedule at all? How are you feeling about that? How can I take care of you in that? What do you think? It's like not asking permission. It's including anyone who's affected in their decision-making process. And so even if someone would prefer to be in one place more than another, I'm kind of a homebody. I like staying home more, and therefore a partner that I live with is going to see me more often. But there's flexibility and there's fluidity as other relationships grow. I'm totally down to change that, and I don't feel rigid and like I'm imposing. And that my staying home from being like kind of an introvert, I'm not saying like they're for the partner who ambiently sees me matters more and their opinion matters more, So it's like, there's a lot of, there's a lot of nuance. Like whenever someone is saying what you're saying, I always have like a lot more questions about what it is that you're seeing unfold in front of you. But yeah, people will get a lot of social pressure when you're getting married or when you're going to have a kid, or, we definitely don't exist in a vacuum. And sometimes people will say, this is just easier. Like you're even saying, it seems like it would be easier for me to just like be monogamish. And if that would make you happy, you absolutely can do that, But if that would make you miserable, if it would feel like you've given up or something, then you don't have to live like that. And you also don't have to be solo polyamorous, It will ironically shrink the pool of people who share your values and share your praxis. A lot of people will share the values, but then not actually do anything about it. But if and when you connect with people who share your praxis as well, then that's amazing. And that can feel so good, And so I don't know what you should do. Only you know what you want to do with your life. But I wouldn't say like to choose a life path out of dejection and pessimism. I don't know that usually leads to a fulfilling life path. But rather, are there other communities that you can tap into? Are there other spaces, online or in person, that you might find more like-minded people? And the introspection of, is there any absolutism in your own mind that you might be categorizing someone as purely ideologically hierarchical based off of optics, rather than going into like a more detailed question about their thinking process and about their praxis of like how people are included in what decisions. So yeah, it's not an all or nothing, but you don't have to either be solo polyamorous or be monogamish. There's a lot of different ways we can embed ourselves in each other's lives in a lot of different distances and a lot of different cadences. And I think it's fair for anyone to like want a say in decisions that impact them, no matter how close or how far, how long you've been in each other's life. So if you're interacting with people who do not share that value, then maybe they stay a little bit more distant and you keep looking for people who do share that value if you want to. I also go through long phases of time where I just am exhausted from the process of looking for like-minded people, that I just like chill out for a little bit. And then a like-minded person happens to me. I just try to go to places where they might be, even if it's not like polyamory specific places. A lot of times like polyamory specific meetups, while it can be a great way to like meet a bunch of polyamorous people all in one shot, like it also, we are a bunch of people that might not mix otherwise. Polyamory is sort of like if there was like a queer meetup. Like, yeah, we are all queer, and there's a lot of different ways to be queer. And there's a lot of people who are cool and who are not cool. And just being queer or just being polyamorous doesn't automatically mean that we have a lot in common or that we'd want to chill with each other or whatever. Like, we can get solidarity in like wanting to be valid in society, but maybe that's as far as it extends. So yeah, I started going to this event called Smut Slam, which is a dirty storytelling night in Berlin once a month. And I met a few awesome people. We just all started having drinks, and then they turned out to be all polyamorous, and a couple of them would call themselves relationship anarchists, and one of them lives with one of their partners, and another person like sees one partner more often than other people, you know what I mean? So it's like, I went to a place not looking for polyamorous people, just looking for like friends with similar interests, happened to find some polyamorous people. Of course, I'm in Berlin, so there are more polyamorous people here, I think, than a lot of cities. But yeah, I put my feet in a room with potentially like-minded people and found some, and their polyamory will maybe not have the picture of what you think theoretically, but that doesn't mean that they're not actually walking the walk. It just means I have follow-up questions. Okay. Follow-up question. Thank you for answering. That was helpful. I'm so glad. I would have to book a solo session to answer those follow-up questions. Absolutely. If you wanna chat, I'm at chillpolyamory.com. Happy to talk with you one-on-one. All right. Next question that was emailed to me. I'm trying to get better at telling people I don't want to date them without them thinking I don't want to know them at all. The idea of let's be friends is cliche, and so many people don't mean it when they say it. So when I say it, people think it's a total rejection. But what if you actually want to build a friendship with someone? How do you get that across? I love that. I get that because there is so much like disingenuous approach to rejection, or like uncomfortable approach to rejection. I'll come with a little bit more compassion. Maybe it's not disingenuous. It's just like there's discomfort in telling someone no. And I would much rather be told like a, half-hearted, let's still be friends. I'd much rather that than someone ghost me. So I appreciate the effort. But sometimes people are really uncomfortable with saying like, I don't want to date. And so they try to offer, let's be friends, but they don't really mean that either. And so when you actually mean it, it can be hard to like stand out otherwise. And I've done this. I did this twice recently. Ultimately, you just invite them to a friendly thing, right? You plan a friend hang. You mean it, and then they'll believe it. That's my short answer. But yeah, I did this twice recently. One time she declined dating me further. We went on a couple of dates, and then she realized she was polysaturated, and she was like, I don't know that we'd want to, like, I would have the ability to keep going and dating. One time I declined dating another person, and was like, we dated, we spent an evening together, and I was like, I don't know that I want to have regularity in this. I don't know that I want to have consistency in this. And so in both times, once with me being, pushed back a little bit, and once with me doing the pushing back, I still wanted to be friends with both of those people. Because it's like I was just saying in the last question, it's so hard to find like-minded people. It's so hard for me to find people who are polyamorous relationship anarchists that I don't want to like throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, you're great. And because I don't want a certain kind of intimacy, or I don't want a certain kind of frequency, or vice versa, you don't want that with me, doesn't mean now that's it and that was the only job that we were interviewing each other for or something. It's like, what shape makes sense then? And I don't necessarily know. Friendship can look a lot of ways. I sleep with some of my friends. Sometimes I want a friendship that's not sexual, and I have to clarify that, and so I think ultimately, short version is you invite them to a friend thing, and then they'll probably say, oh, wow, you were serious, cool. And then they start inviting you to things, and you actually just build a friendship that way. And then, yeah, if they also want that, then you can build a friendship, and it's really nice. And sometimes my friendships then re-enter into like a sexual place again, and then ebb out of that. There's a lot of flexibility and fluidity in my connections. And I really appreciate everybody that I talk to these days. Like, if they're open to that kind of communication, then they're definitely somebody I want to keep in my life. So if you say, I want to be friendly with you, and here's an example of what I'd love to do as friends, and then they take you up on that, then yeah, that's very special. Like, someone who can have that kind of direct negotiation of a relationship, boom, that rules, you know? I think it is more normalized in like queer spaces. And I think it is definitely more normalized with neurodivergent people, but absolutely, like, you can have that kind of connection in any place, you know, even if it is more normative. It just might take a little bit more work if somebody is less used to challenging norms. Next question in the chat. What's the German word for polyamory? Just curious. It's polyamory, but with an IE instead of Y. There's a lot of overlap with German and English. It's actually pretty interesting. Okay. Next question. On your unicorns video, do you think any of those hunters were in healthy relationships? So this is referencing the video that I have I have a short version on my Instagram and TikTok, but I also have a long video essay on YouTube, also Chill Polyamory. This is going to be on my second channel, but my main channel, Chill Polyamory, has video essays analyzing examples of non-monogamy, but using fictional characters so that I can, if I have shit talking to talk, I'm not actually talking about anybody real. So I have a video essay on a mini series on unicorns, specifically one woman who plays with a lot of different couples. And I think specifically that video is more about play partners and swinging. So it's not so much about polyamorous unicorn hunters. When people talk about polyamorous unicorn hunters, it's often a couple who is looking for a third to create a triad romantically and like maybe even build a life with a person. When it comes to play partners and swingers, which is what the video is about, like, I don't know, I feel like that's a lot more upfront and direct, like not always something I would frame as transactional, but it is a lot more like just, you know, straightforward. We're a couple. We want to have sex with you. The person is like, great, I'd love to have sex with you. And then they have sex. You know what I mean? It's like a little bit simpler. Sometimes people want the fun and play and not the talking or not the ego death that can sometimes come along with it, you know, the humbling that can come along with it. So in that video, there was, for example, a queer couple, a sapphic couple who the two women had all of these rules of like, you're not allowed to French kiss another person. And they told the third about that after they were done having sex. And like, are you being good? Are you behaving? You know, was what one person asked another. And, you know, and so in that way, I feel like, you know, are you both good? You know, as a couple, it seems like there's a lot of insecurity when there's like a lot of rigid rules like that, sort of dictating who can do what. I just wonder, like, how secure do you feel and how safe do you feel? And I personally don't want to play with a couple that doesn't really feel secure. In that series, there was also a couple that one person was being a dom for the first time and tying someone for the first time, and their like spouse was their dom. So it was like a dom sort of like teaching another baby dom. And there was a power struggle between the two of them. And I would not want to be the third under that of like both of these two people fighting, having a power struggle when I'm the most like vulnerable person as the third. So there were a lot of situations in that series that I would not want to find myself in. It doesn't mean automatically that they are unhealthy in every scenario. It might mean that they are inexperienced or that they are reckless or that they are not being honest. And maybe in other situations, they are incredibly adept and mature and carry themselves in a way that I would respect, you know? And so I don't really think it's all or nothing, but I think when it comes to non-monogamy, yeah, it can be incredibly revealing of how a couple is doing when they try to invite someone in. And I would say the majority of the couples in that series were not doing great on average. There were some really nice moments with a few of them, but on the whole, I'd say most of the couples were like not people I'd want to, not people that I would feel completely like stable and taken care of spending time with them. Next question that was emailed to me. Is it wrong that I feel less threatened when a meta is married or has a primary partner? I don't want to assume unmarried people are automatically threats, but that's what it feels like to me most of the time. How do I change my thinking on this? I'm really glad that you're asking yourself this question, because it is very common. It is something that, like, you know, in monogamy, mononormativity, we're taught, oh, that person is not a threat because they're married. So they're not trying to then also get married to my love interest, for instance. So I think it is understandable of how a lot of people have that impulse or have that left over from mononormative social conditioning. However, I know for a fact that it's just not true. It's like a false sense of security, you know? It's like, just like in monogamy, you know, people disrespect each other all the time. People leave each other all the time. Like, and the status of like their other love interest kind of doesn't matter, because if they're going to disrespect you or leave you or, you know, threaten you, then they would do that regardless of what position they're in usually. So I think it is something that, like, the optics can be reassuring, and it can be something we can point to and hold on to and like tell ourselves that we're not in danger, but it's not actually, you know, something you can rely on. It's the assumption of safety. Yeah, so I think it's leftover from monogamy. Like, they're not a threat because they're off the market. And so even in polyamory, when they're very much participating in romance or sex with somebody, it's like, well, they've already been on the relationship escalator with one person, therefore they won't want to do it with another person. And that's just also not true. We often, when we fall for someone, we want to build more of a life with them a lot of times, you know, and so we can expand and have multiple people that we build lives with, you know. And so I think this is the non-monogamous version of the monogamous myth. But it also depends on what kind of non-monogamy you're trying to have. Like, if you and your partner have an open relationship, then I imagine, you know, that does fit a bit more into like none of you are open to having other like spouses, for instance. So yeah, but when it comes to polyamory, like, how do you change your thinking on this? Well, you're doing it now. You're questioning it. I think it starts by questioning it, of like realizing, I'm still buying into something that I don't really want to buy into, or I can intellectually know that that's not rational. I wonder why it offers me comfort. I wonder why it is still reassuring, you know, and to not judge yourself for it, but just to like say, like, just to ask it questions of like, what is it about this partner that I assume they are safe? What, because they have a ring on their finger? And like, that partner who is solo polyamorous, who is young, who doesn't have any kids yet, if they want kids at all, why am I assuming automatically that they have bad intentions, that they're going to steal my partner? You know what I mean? Like, why am I assuming that? Where did I get that idea? Is it rooted in their actions? Has one person been duplicitous and dishonest and made me feel uncomfortable in their actions? Or is it just their status? And do I actually buy that somebody, the optics of someone's situation equals what they're capable of, or what they even want? Sometimes people are married and they don't want to be married anymore, and they're looking for a way out. You know, it's like, so yeah, we're taught from a young age to view things like that. Even the language of like off the market, like, it implies you can remove this person from like a competitive marketplace. And like, so it goes right along with our social training to think that they won't take my spot. They're not trying to. But if you want polyamory, and especially if you want to challenge hierarchy in polyamory, the first step is to pause whenever you notice that. And that can look like, they like her more than me. Oh, wait, no, actually, that's not a threat at all because she has a spouse. Is it a thought-stopping response. What I mean by that is like, are you engaging in a fear, in an anxiety, in a concern? Are you noticing an insecurity start to bubble up? And then this warm blanket gets put over it. Well, they're married, so I don't even have to think about that. Is this thought being used to avoid dealing with an uncomfortable emotion, dealing with an uncomfortable fear or stress? Are you stopping that processing by grasping for a comfortable story, And again, I'm not trying to villainize that if that resonates as true at all. It's just like anything that we use as a stopping thought. Why? And is it possible to still engage with that uncomfortable thought? Is it possible to still say that fear all the way through? And I'm scared you're going to leave me. I'm scared they are better than me. I'm scared this, or I'm upset about that, or, and can you actually like process that with your partner or with your support network or, with your therapist or whatever? It's just like, yeah, I think that can be the biggest danger of really clinging to norms as a means of security is like, what is that getting in the way of you like engaging with? And what is that getting in the way of you dealing with or digesting? And maybe the answer is nothing, but that's usually my first biggest question. So yeah, most of the time, so I say that, and I do also want to acknowledge that time is limited and resources are limited. And so maybe there is less time. Maybe a person who has a spouse and kids has less time. And so you're looking at that and you're like, I'm comforted by the fact that they literally have less time to give my partner. Therefore, I don't have as much to lose. Sometimes that can be how that thought goes. Can that still be talked all the way through, right? Like, do we just automatically say you're safe, so I don't have to think about it? Or do we say like, oh, the reason I say they're safe is because I'm worried about losing time with you? Because even if that is how it plays out, if they get a partner who is not married or who doesn't have kids, that also doesn't mean that automatically all of your partner's free time is going to be consumed by this person, right? Like, it's still treating love as like this scarce marketplace, this supply and demand, rather than like everything gets negotiated about who wants what and who's able to do what, And so can that just be like, looked at a little bit more closely of why is the thought coming up and what are you thinking underneath it? What is the thought underneath it? And are you still buying into the idea that ability and access equals threat, and why? And do you trust your partner at the end of the day? That's like the big question. Okay. Let me see. Do I have any quick questions in here? I might not. There's like some. Okay, I do have one question in here that I could probably answer in the last few minutes. I have a question about reaching out to new community groups near you. I got in touch with the kink community in a big city, set up a pre-meet with someone in a leadership position. Some types of sexuality are illegal where I live, so the group is cautious. The pre-meet turned into something like a date, and we had sexual contact that went faster and further than I was comfortable with. I'm so sorry. I eventually found an excuse to stop things. He was whiny. I stood my ground and left. This experience left a bad taste in my mouth. How much of a red flag should I read this for the community, and should I continue to go to events? So I'm really sorry that happened to you. And it sounds like whoever was in this position of power was abusing that position of power. And so I just want to validate that a screening for like safety for the community, that shouldn't be then leveraged to have sex with you and pressure you. And yeah, it can also come across as very like gatekeepy, like, well, will you be allowed into the community if you say no? That's what I mean, leveraging power. You want a thing, they have some access to the thing that they can give or deprive you of. And so that is not a cool time to initiate something sexual unless it is very thoroughly negotiated. So I hate the fact that he was whiny and, the fact you had to find an excuse to stop things. I'm so sorry. So I'm glad you stood your ground and left. But I don't know. I mean, is that representative of the whole community? You know, if other community members knew, would they be upset at him too? I would say that's probably more of the test of community. So are there any other touch points for the community? Are there any other like representatives? I don't know. I wouldn't base the entire group on one person's actions. Sometimes really sketchy people can rise to positions of power in a group, unfortunately. Like people who want that position of power might be the least, the person I want in that role least, I'll say. I've known plenty of people who were like organizers who were shitty. And like, it's a fair question of like wondering if this is just how it is for everyone, wondering if this is normal and acceptable behavior. So that would be my question is this normal and acceptable behavior? And is there anyone else I can ask? And you could go to an event and ask people there or get a vibe check there, have a plan B and a plan C of how you can get out of it if you feel uncomfortable. But, you know, ultimately, I would be surprised if that was normal. But yeah, you're not wrong that is uncool. And hopefully you're able to connect with people who would agree with you in that community. Okay, well, I believe that's it. We're up, our hour is up. Thank you so much for everybody who is here. Thank you so much for being my patron. You pay my bills, you know, and you also fund the creation of the podcast. You fund all of my video essays. I don't really make money off of those things, you know. On occasion, once or twice a year, I'll take a sponsorship if I like the product, if I think it's worth selling to you. But at the end of the day, Patreon is my main source of income. And so I'm really grateful to you. And this is also why I want to be available to you, you know, in a variety of ways. So if you have a question that you would like me to cover next time, again, the next chat is in 2 weeks. So you don't have to wait a full month. You can email me, you can DM me on Patreon. Don't DM me on Instagram because it's hard for me to know like who's a patron and who's not. But DM me on Patreon or yeah, you can email me. And hopefully I'll be able to tend to it next time. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you later. Bye.